Mayor Gutierrez from the City of Moreno Valley, Councilmember Ciarto from the City of Murrieta, and Councilmember Rush from the City of Eastville. Do any of you want to say one word? No. Okay. Okay. Do you want, I don't think they could hear you, so you can do that again?
Okay.
Trying to figure out which of the mics.
The other one. Try
Okay.
the other one.
No, that one's on. Mine's on now. Now you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're all good. No, I'm just pleased to be back on ARCOG. It's been about a 10-year stretch that I've been gone, and I look forward to working with you all on the issues that come up in the county. Thanks.
And just as a point of information for everybody, this is Kelly's third term around, twice being chair of WRCOG in the past. And
Okay, so
Mayor Gutierrez, you're
It didn't work on mine.
here. Would you like to say anything? That's a request.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Just looking forward to serving on the WRCOG, and I'm excited. Thank you.
Great, welcome. And Adam?
Okay, she'll shut it off.
I'm on a different side this time. Thank you, everybody. I know I have big shoes to fill, both literally and figuratively, so I look forward to serving. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to go back a little bit, and bear with me, I'm not used to all the technology here, but we do need to do roll call, so what do we need to do, Janice?
Just everybody just needs to vote to show that they're logged in and they're present.
So please vote on your screen.
City of Calamasa and Canyon Lake. Who's here? Okay, so we have 20 people here, 4 missing. Next, we'll move to public comments. We have one from Arnold San Miguel from Southern California Association of Governments. Oh.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just wanted to make 2 quick announcements. If you were able to attend our very first earthquake seminar with Dr. Lucy Jones, we are now bringing the second part of that. It'll be an all-day workshop, 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and it's scheduled for Tuesday, January 31st in Ontario. We're still locking down the exact location. The goals of the workshop include develop a framework to address local vulnerabilities related to earthquakes. Number 2, provide a toolkit to support efforts in achieving results, taking action in a reasonable time frame. And 3, share strategies to build, establish, and/or enhance community-wide partnerships for this effort. You may be aware that the City of Los Angeles hired Dr. Lucy Jones after her retirement, and they have enacted some ordinances changes at the City of Los Angeles, so we're looking to help the region benefit from that effort. In order to achieve this, we're looking for each city to provide 3 representatives, an elected official, a building official, and the city manager or a public safety official. So we encourage you to attend that workshop again, 8:30 a.m. to 4 in Ontario on January 31st. And then, if I may, very quickly, as you may be aware, we are seeking nominations for our sustainability awards that will be announced at the SCAG May 5th and 6th General Assembly and Regional Conference in Coachella Valley, and that deadline is in January. So I would encourage you to, if you have a project, whether it was funded by either a Compass demonstration or sustainability grant, didn't have to be funded by that in the past. Any project that fits the criteria is eligible to be recognized by the region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
I have no requests.
Okay, seeing none, then we do have a proclamation, so I'm going to ask Councilmember Randon Lane to come up to the dais or whatever we want to call it. All the way up. As Randon mentioned to us at our last meeting that he is leaving us, Kelly's coming on, but we wanted to give him a proclamation to recognize his service with WRCOG, and I've asked him to say a very brief comment.
Well, that's your fault.
We can turn the mic off.
Give out my notes real quick. You know, it's interesting. I've had the privilege of serving on this committee as an alternate or as the member since being elected in 2008, and I've thoroughly enjoyed serving on this board. I had the privilege of serving as chair, which was a unique, very unique experience. But as you're involved, you realize that the people on the board behind me, we make the decisions, but really what makes it happen are the people. And I have to say a couple of things. And I'll try not to take too long, Debbie. Okay. Everybody knows Janice Leonard, and without Janice and the work that she does, this board would not function. Jennifer Ward makes everything happen. If you've been to any of our events, our annual dinners, that's really a lot of what Jennifer Ward does, and with help from Andrea. Where's Andrea? Does a phenomenal job representing everybody at SCAG. And Tyler Masters, in what was probably the most hilarious video of any event ever, Tyler Masters did a phenomenal job, and I want to thank him for that. Crystal, the work that you do with your group is, we couldn't do the things that we do without you. Barbara Spoonhour, the HERO program, as everybody knows, in our organization, what an incredible program that we have, and you spearhead that, and you do such a great job of making sure that we're always informed. Chris Gray, taking over for Ruth Ann Taylor Berger with the TUMF program, really some big shoes to fill, and you've done a really good job. Ernie Reyna, dealing with an organization that has a $60 million budget, which is a great increase in being able to do the things that you do to make everything work, and for us to be such a sound financially organization, you did such a great job. Steve, what to say about the lawsuits that we've had. But you've done such a good job of representing this organization and making sure that the decisions that we make are always made on solid legal advice. And then to the rest of the committee, you guys and men and women have done such a great job representing your cities and representing this region. I couldn't go without saying Laura, without appointing her to the committee, one of probably the most thorough-read committee members there is. Catches all the dots, the commas, and the missed words, and you do a phenomenal job. But thank you to everybody. Thank you for allowing me to serve. But as Debbie said, you'll be in good hands with Kelly. He was, as I talk about the fact that the city of Murrieta really going out and being involved in regional bodies really was Kelly back in the day. No one else really got involved in the city of Murrieta, and Kelly really kind of led the charge with that, and so he was on WRCOG and was chair 2 times in a row, and so I think you're in good hands with Kelly. But thank you very much for allowing me to serve, and thank you for letting me say more than one word.
Well, on behalf of the Executive Committee, we do want to thank you for all the time and the energy you did put in here. And we know this is just the next step in your road of life, so we thank you for all you've done, what you're going to do. Come back and just wave. You don't have to say anything, just wave. So, there you go. Brandon. Next, we have a consent calendar. Do we have anything to pull, any items to pull from the consent calendar? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
You do.
We have a motion by San Jacinto and a second by the City of Corona. Please vote. You didn't?
I just want to note that the city of Wildemar is still showing you and Wildemar are switched. I'll have to fix that in the system.
Okay. Okay. Is this correct then now, the 24 in favor of? Yeah. Okay. Consent items are approved as recommended. Next, we have our reports. First one is the PACE program activities update by Michael. You're not on. You're not on. You're not on.
Nope. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Michael Wazga, Program Manager for WRCOG. Today I'll be presenting a brief update on the HERO program, which provides financing for residential and commercial properties for energy efficient, water conservation, renewable energy projects. Financing is then added to their tax bill for repayment. Begin with an overview of the activities in the HERO program. As of now, there are 361 jurisdictions participating in the Renovate America California HERO program. Through the writing, there have been 161,000 applications. 105,350 have been approved for over $6.4 billion in funding. And in WRCOG subregion, from January 2012 through today, there have been over 52,000 applications. 35,000 of those have been approved for $427 million in available funding. To date, 39,000 energy and water efficiency measures have been installed in western Riverside County. These equate to nearly $740 million in economic impact, 3,622 jobs created, 1.34 billion gallons of water saved, 847,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reduced, and 314 gigawatt hours of energy saved in the subregion. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of 21 million trees or 175,000 SUVs being taken off the road. We provided a copy of your jurisdiction's information in your folder. As of today, we have three actions that I'm requesting. One is to receive a summary of the revised California Hero Program report. Two is to conduct a public hearing for the counties of Colusa, Mendocino, and Siskiyou unincorporated areas as associate members, to increase the program area to include these additional jurisdictions, and to hear all interested persons who may support or object to or inquire about the program. And lastly, 3, to adopt resolution number 0117, confirming the modification of the California Hero Program report and expand the program area. So, thank you, Madam Chair. I will take any questions if there are any.
Okay, this is a public hearing, but we'll open it for any executive committee members to have any questions or comments. Seeing none, we'll now have the public hearing open. Janice, is there any person or persons on the phone or in the audience that have questions or comments with regards to the program or the extent of the boundary area proposed to be included within the program?
Do we have any callers online for the California Hero Program? I hear none.
Okay. Seeing no one in the audience, and we'll close the public hearing. Once again, are there any members of the committee that would like to ask any questions? Seeing none, then we need a motion. It's been moved by Temecula and seconded by Supervisor Ashley. Please vote.
City of Canyon Lake, thank you. City of Corona, please vote. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passed 20-0. Thank you, Michael. Next, we'll have our TUMP report by Christopher.
Good afternoon, board members. Christopher Gray, Director of Transportation. I'm here to give you an update on our TUMP program, particularly some near-term activities related to our Nexus study. As you all know, we've been undergoing a comprehensive update of our Nexus study. Our latest activities have related to the list of projects which are funded by the Nexus study. We have gone through a comprehensive effort with our jurisdictions, our public works directors, and other assorted staff members to revisit every project that is in the Nexus study. We have in our administrative plan a series of quantitative criteria for projects to be included in the TUMP Nexus study. The criteria are as follows. It must be a 4-lane roadway, and the projections must show that that project will be carrying 20,000 cars or more, which is the one of the thresholds to reach a 4-lane roadway. And the individual project must also be at or near, or in many cases above capacity. As part of that process, it has to do a lot with the fact that our growth projections have changed. There's development in areas of the county where growth had not been projected. There's also been, in some cases, there's been more development than has been historically projected. The bottom line is we've reduced the network cost by about $300 million, or it's about 10% of the total cost of the program. We are proposing to be completing, we are in the process of completing our Nexus study document this month. We will be convening hopefully a final meeting of our TUMP Nexus study ad hoc committee to review those recommendations and make recommendations on the scenarios to move forward. And so our schedule is to meet one more time with our Nexus study ad hoc committee meeting this month. We'll then be releasing a draft Nexus study in February 2017. There will be a public comment period of 30 days, and we will start to bring the Nexus study to our various committees. We will begin with our Admin and Finance Committee and work our way through our city managers, our public works directors, and back to the Executive Committee. It is our intention to have every committee review the Nexus study twice, an informational presentation, and then ask each committee to take action. We will also be, during this time, responding to our public comments on our Nexus study, as well as holding additional workshops with developers and other interested parties on the Nexus study. And what that means is if this all lines up and everything works out, we'll be asking you to take action in April, and then we'll move to the process by which any fee changes, if there is a fee change, gets adopted, which means any change in the fee would take effect roughly July and August, depending on the individual jurisdiction's actions. As many of you are aware, the TUMP is implemented through ordinance at the city level, so then the cities would have to pass any changes in their TUMP ordinances. And depending on the city and depending on your requirements, that may take roughly 2, 3, even 4 months for all the requisite public hearings. So we're just here today to tell you our schedule. This is a schedule we're committed to. We're actively working on this with our consultants. And this is a receive and file item, but Madam Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions members may have at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from anyone? It's not showing. Supervisor? Okay. Why don't you just go ahead?
Chuck's having too much fun pushing my buttons. Thank you. If you could walk me through, in the previous consent calendar had a lot of good information on TUMF in there and some of the challenges going forward. I was told by a former city council member who was on this commission when the TUMF was created, and I may have misunderstood or didn't hear him properly, but he was telling me that each, how do I want to put this, that each city or WRCOG gets 15%, can spend 15% of whatever they collect. Can you clarify what he said, or perhaps what you...
Yeah, so first of all, we are capped by our administrative plan at spending no more than 4% of all revenues on program administration. It primarily goes to pay the staff as well as for our consultants. So all the money, for example, we doing the Nexus study, the modeling, all the technical studies, that's all paid for by the program. There is another provision where cities are allowed to spend a certain amount of money in soft costs for a project. So, for example, when we give the county, let's say $20 million to work on a project, our program allows the county to spend up to about 35% of that in soft costs. So that's planning, engineering, design, contingency, and program management. So, for example, what the county very often does is they will hire firms to be professional program managers, and so there's construction done by a contractor. There's another layer of paid construction managers and then county staff above that. So we allow a certain percentage of the fees to go to soft costs. Every dollar which a jurisdiction spends, whether it's hard costs or soft costs, have to be substantiated. So, for example, the county sends us invoices that said, we had 8 hours of staff time overseeing the Clinton Keith Road. We had another $20,000 in consultants managing the construction and $200,000 on the actual construction itself.
Okay, so there is no admin fee per se where you can just slice a portion off the top because your agency, and I don't mean you personally, but I mean any agency is administering the program. There's nothing like that.
No, we specifically discourage that and we require. And so, for example, jurisdictions that don't have timesheets. So, for example, the city of Rupa Valley will send us invoices with their staff timesheets saying, for example, their staff engineer worked on the Limonite interchange. And they have to substantiate that that person spent 8, 16, 40 hours. Jurisdictions whose staff do not fill out timesheets or do not charge their time on an hourly basis cannot request reimbursement. It just so happens that most agencies track their staff's time sufficiently with sufficient detail to do that.
Okay, great. And my last question, and you may have covered it in your initial report, when it comes back to this commission, it's coming back with recommendations, I assume.
That's correct.
My concern is what we're doing to the retail side where we have the highest fees of anybody, what we can do to correct that, and when will we know what the recommendation is going to be? Because all the studies, as I think I'm reading, and I'm not clear, but as I think I've been reading on the consent calendar item, was about our existing fee structure, not about where we're headed.
Correct. So we've been sharing all that information with our ad hoc, and our ad hoc has directed us into looking at phasing or freezing or having some kind of a tiered retail fee approach, because we concur with you that Our fee study has shown that our retail fee is substantially above our neighbors. And so we've gotten direction from our city managers, we've gotten direction from the elected officials. So our current thought and our current staff discussions have all been about how we can mitigate the impact of any retail fee. I will tell you that our latest calculations, at one point we had a 60% fee increase for retail. Right now, our study is showing the most we can charge is a 20% increase. I personally still think that may be too high, so we're going to bring a scenario back to our ad hoc for them to consider, which is either freezing the retail fee, phasing in the retail fee, or trying to mitigate that in some way, because we would agree that the data all shows that the retail fee is far higher than any of our neighbors, and our fee study substantiates that.
Okay, very good. That's all I have.
Okay. City of Temecula?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but Supervisor Jeffries always, stimulates.
The current projections is that requirement will kick in about 2 years after OPR releases its final set of guidelines. They have not released their final set of guidelines. There's been a substantial amount of pushback from the development industry, from the MPOs, SCAG in particular. They were supposed to be released in the end of the year. They were not. They have not been released. They may be coming out. And once that happens, there's about a 2-year period. That assumes there is no legal challenge. That assumes there is no statutory challenge. That assumes there's no rollback of requirements. We, in fact, have asked SCAG, as a side note, we have asked SCAG to help us fund a study on how we can ease the burden of that regulation on our development industry and our local jurisdictions, because we view it as a fairly substantial unfunded mandate. And we are also currently in we're currently in discussions with our legal counsel on ways that which the TUMF could be slightly altered or changed or evolved a little bit to provide mitigation for VMT. I will also add that many of our jurisdictions have level of service requirements, either in their general plan or their traffic study guidelines, and unless those change, the TUMF will still provide mitigation for that as well.
And admittedly, I don't know enough about VMT. I'm starting to get an awareness of it. So you giving this information is helpful. Have we taken a position that the VMT is bad, that it's problematic, particularly when we look at it in relation to the current way that we figure vehicle miles traveled through the ITE handbook?
Sure. So our stance on SB 743 has been that we've chosen to partner with RCTC, SCAG, and others in comment letters that they've written. We believe our staff's approach is that on the VMT side is whether we agree with it or not, it is regulation that we're going to have to prepare for, and so the best approach is, one, to work through our regional partners, but also study this implementation of that. I will say that there's some aspects of that approach which has some validity, and I'll give you an example. Historically, we've penalized retailers based on, their fee is calculated just based on the number of trips. What happens in retail trips is they don't go as far as a house trip. When you drive to work, oftentimes you're driving a lot farther than you are to the store. I drive every day 20 plus miles to go to work. I'm not going to drive 20 miles to go to a grocery store unless it's a Trader Joe's. So we've had our consultant for the fee study look into some different ways of calculating the fee, and one of the ways is to bring in trip length, because that reduces the fee which retailers pay. So there's some validity in there, but I would say that the VMT approach is problematic for a lot of our cities because they haven't done it before, and it creates a fairly substantial burden, and so we're hoping to ease that burden by doing some work on a regional basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Has the ad hoc committee embraced or began to look at the difference or the dichotomy between the two methods?
I would say that hasn't been an explicit discussion that we've had with the ad hoc, but it is something that's in our Nexus study, and it is something that we've shared through our outreach meetings we've had with developers and we've had with other interest groups to say that we are now calculating our fee based on how many trips you generate and how far those trips go, which is a new approach that the TUMP didn't do up to about a year ago.
Okay, thank you. And just if I may finish with a comment, Supervisor Jeffries, I look forward to robust conversation with this body when that comes up, because just the old way of doing things are not accurate, and things have changed. There's just this dynamic going on, and literally when you're dealing with properties that are at almost a zero land basis right now that can't be developed, adding additional fees, both to residential and commercial, literally is going to just shut down economic development activity. And so we need, as a body, this is just my comment and I'll move on, I don't know the answers. I do not know, okay, but we really need to just start getting outside. I hate to use the cliche outside the box, but start thinking of different ways in which to do this so that it promotes economic development, doesn't add another layer of a burden. So I'm really looking forward to a robust discussion coming up when it comes out of the ad hoc. Thank you, as always, for all the good information, Chris.
Thank you. Supervisor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, I have maybe one question, one comment. As it relates to TUM fees and the Nexus study, we've talked a lot about what the different rates might be, what the Nexus study has indicated in regards to the cost of construction. And maybe I missed it. Maybe we talked about it earlier on. But I do recall in the early days of the TUM program, we talked a lot about the actual cost of building the projects that were listed, and then we compared that with our projections of what we were going to collect. And I'm just going to take a wild guess. At the beginning, it was something like it's a $5 billion program, and at the rate we were going, we were going to collect $4 billion, something like that. And so in the interim, we've slipped a little further behind. And so I'm not saying what I'm saying to promote that we jack up fees even higher, because I'm just as sensitive to the impacts of those fees, as Mr. Nagar points out and my colleague Supervisor Jeffries points out. But I think also in the dialogue, though, should be included that let's all keep in mind that here's where we set the bar of what we want, and this is what we're going to get with a given set of fees, so that we know going in with our eyes open that we're not going to be able to build the things that we want to build. And then the second part, and I'm glad that Mr. Nagar brought it up, because it's been, I represent the board of supervisors at SCAG. It's been a subject of conversation at SCAG and also here. Several months back, how much money, Mike, did the French Valley Interchange lose?
$32 million.
$32 million that was to come from the state transportation improvement program, which gets a large part of its money from the gas tax. And the discussion at SCAG was that problem is going to get worse before it gets better. And we know why it's going to get worse, because they've never updated the formula. They pegged that formula based on cars getting 10 miles to the gallon, and they get a lot more to the gallon, so they use less gas, or they use no gas at all if you're, say, an electric vehicle. So, and those comments are not intended to promote a program, a particular program. I like Mr. Nagar's use of the word robust. I was watching a show about politicians, a fictional show, and they were arguing about who got to use the word robust, because they didn't both want to use it. But it's a good word, isn't it? I'm looking forward to that robust discussion. And like you were suggesting that we be a part of the dialogue. We can, I guess, sit on the sidelines, just complain, or we can weigh in and try to propose workable solutions that we can live with, more than likely, because we have so many workers that leave the county every day. Our residents, our constituents, are going to be hurt to a greater extent than folks that live right around the corner from where they work. And we have less public transportation opportunities. So I'm looking forward to that discussion as well. But I don't think we should just sit on the sidelines and complain. We got to weigh in.
Absolutely.
There's my 3 cents worth.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? We have no one else in the queue? Seeing none? Yes.
Madam Chairman, I just wanted to also offer that if any of our members or their staff would like in-person briefings on the Nexus study, we'll be presenting materials through all the committees, but we're always available to meet with you or your staff for a one-on-one if you'd like a presentation. We will meet anytime, anywhere. This is a critical item for the Transportation Department in 2017, and so whatever, in addition to our regular committee meetings, please let us know if you want us to come talk to you or if you have specific questions about your city or how it affects your city. I wanted to tell you, Rick and I will make the time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, one more comment
Quickly.
or question. Something you may want to bring back to this body when we discuss it is maybe we look at the economics that were in place when we implemented TUMF. I think it was implemented when in 02?
02, 03, 04.
Okay. And during that time there was lots of money to go around. Okay, and of course from 03 to 07, you know what? Developers should have paid what they paid, and there was plenty of juice and equity to go around. And then, of course, after 08, equity was wiped off the table. Literally, land values went down, and so, but we haven't adjusted to that. At the same time, costs to build infrastructure haven't gone down. So, so we have a real dilemma. But you may want to come up with that and just sort of have those numbers when we look at the economic conditions that were in place then, the trend, and where we're at now.
Well, part of one of our investments over the past year has been doing our fee comparison study, which includes a series of development pro formas on what the impact of what are turning out to be fairly limited fee increases would be on various development types. So we're going to package all that information and bring it to you so it's a comprehensive story of really there's 3 key items: what has happened to the costs, what projects are in our network, and then what would the impact of these fee increases be on different types of development. So we want you to have the full range of information.
I don't mean to be redundant, but I know it will be important to me to be able to present to this body what was situational back in 2003, what progressed, if it fell off in 08, and where we're at today, because we justified the fee in 03. And when the whole ordinance was justified, it made sense. Okay, it made a whole lot of sense. I'd like to look at it in that context. Does it make the same sense today as it made in 03? And if it does, great. If not, what changed? And maybe that's how we begin to dismantle and reassemble some new type of way to go forward that works for everybody, that builds infrastructure.
There was no question in there, right?
I could rephrase it as a question.
No, that's okay.
Do you agree, Mr.
Well,
Ray?
I'd have to consider that. The issue I would bring up is, regardless of what the conditions were in 2003, we're dealing with what the conditions are today. And we've looked, for example, at historical rates of cost increases. And there was a time at which TUMF rates were going up faster than, for example, the CPI. And now they've merged. There were times when the TUMF was going up faster than the construction cost index, and they've merged. So and maybe this is my bias because I'm relatively new, I would say the critical item to me is what are the conditions today and what are the conditions for the foreseeable future. But if you'd like us to talk about the conditions at the time of the program inception, we're happy to do that. But I think it's more germane to touch on what's going to happen moving forward.
Okay. This is a receive and file item, so unless there's anything else, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next item, which is the WRCOG agency office relocation. Jennifer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Ward, Director of Government Relations for WRCOG, and joining me in this presentation is Ernie Rainey, our Chief Financial Officer. And we'll go to the slides now. Just as by way of background, this item is something we're bringing back to the committee after a previous presentation to the August 2016 Executive Committee. And since then, we've had multiple discussions with the Administration and Finance Committee. Again, going way back, WRCOG's office, which at the time employed about 20 staff, moved into our current office suite here at the CAC, the County Administrative Center, in 2001. So we've been at this location since 2001. When we moved in, we had about 20 staff. We currently now, with the addition of the Riverside County Habitat Conservation Authority, with the addition of a robust internship program WRCOG has started, as well as our just natural growth over this decade and a half, we have at any point up to about 35 staff in the office. So earlier this year, or actually at the beginning of last year, we began exploring options for new office space because of the constraints we experience here at the CAC. We presented a couple options to the Administration and Finance Committee early 2016, and one of those options was a 10,000 square foot lease across the street in the formerly Security Bank, which is now the Pacific Premier Bank building. Sometimes we refer to that building as the EDA building because it is that space is owned and leased by the County Economic Development Agency. When we presented that option to this committee in August, this committee directed us to do a lot more research on options, other options here within this building. They asked us to look outside the region, so not just in downtown Riverside, but some other jurisdictions, and also look into the potential to purchase a building versus secure a lease and renovate that space. Another issue that the Pacific Premier Bank suite presented is it has a very high upfront cost, which Ernie will talk about in a little bit. So we found some options with lower initial upfront costs. So after conducting all of that research, we retained the services of a broker, and his name is Andy Lasgarden, and he's here in the office or in the audience if anyone has questions for our broker. So after all of that research, we went back to the Admin and Finance Committee last month in December, and based on that discussion, we whittled it down and are presenting two priority options. We have a preference that we're asking for your feedback on today. And just, looking at the big picture, really what WRCOG staff is looking for a successful and functional office space is 5 major goals. Obviously, we want to provide an efficient workspace that enables us to be productive. We want to be able to collaborate. We have a team, as I mentioned, of anytime up to 35 employees and consultants and interns in the office. We really want the ability to maintain that collaboration and work internally with not just our team members, but also host meetings and visits from all of the staff and representatives from our member agencies. Obviously, transparency. Us being a local government agency, we want to maintain the ability to promptly respond to any Public Records Act requests, as well as comply with all of the regulation to publicize information, agendas, all of those items. An additional item is to give a professional image of our agency when people visit us. And then finally, location. As the Regional Council of Governments for Western Riverside County, we, obviously do work with all of your jurisdictions. And so having a location that's accessible to not just our member agencies, but also to the many regional partners from throughout Southern California that WRCOG works with on a regular basis was very important to us. And as our current office space stands, we only have about 5,000 square feet for that total of up to 35 or 37 people at once. It doesn't meet all of those goals I just mentioned. We don't have our own conference space with the exception of one room that only holds about 6 people. All of our other conference room space and meeting space is dependent on availability from other departments here in the building. And the space we do have has now become pretty constrained, pretty disorganized. If you don't believe me, come visit us anytime soon. So we're really looking at to just increase that capacity, be able to have room to grow, and also be able to provide that productive, transparent, professional work environment. So I'm going to go over, another item the Executive Committee asked us to revisit was how does our agency compare in terms of square footage with other agencies that perform similar functions. So Ernie and his team did a survey of these 6 agencies you see above, and you can see that given the square feet per employee for all of these agencies, WRCOG falls well below the lowest, which is RTA at 245 square foot per employee, as well as much further below the average, which is about 335 square feet per employee. So in order to address kind of all of those constraints and also respond to direction based from this committee, we have provided a streamlined list of options today. And for each of these options, I'm going to talk about kind of the disadvantages and the advantages, and Ernie's going to go through the specific costs, lease agreement, and those types of numbers with you. The preference that came out of our last month's discussion with the admin and finance is option 1, which is the Citrus Towers building. We do have 2 options on here, which are somewhat purchase options. Option 3 is kind of a hybrid option. We've had a ton of discussions with Western Municipal Water District. They have a facility on Alessandro. They've been looking to either secure a tenant for that space. Our most recent discussions with Western have informed us that they're actually now looking to sell that building. So we have included it here for comparison, but it's not likely that this would be a rental opportunity. It's probably going to be something that's available for purchase. We've also included a building here at the suggestion of Supervisor Jeffries, but this is just an example. You know, there's vacant commercial buildings all over the region that could be a potential space for us. However, we believe from a policy perspective that purchasing a building is not necessarily the most responsible or best way to go because of some of the liabilities, which I'll let Ernie talk a little bit about that right now if you want.
Thank you. Ernie Reyna, Chief Financial Officer. So with respect to the purchase options, some of the things that we looked at when staff examined is the amount of time through financing that it would take to pay back, and knowing the cash flow situation of what we have now, we know 10 years we're pretty comfortable with. Beyond 10 years, it gets a little bit of not really knowing what to expect. So staff did go out, take a look at what the interest rates were for that particular type of building, look at the value, which was about $3 million on that building, this particular building, at 4.5% interest rate. So we came out with a mortgage rate of about $23,000 per month. And then when you add in all the utilities, the insurance and maintenance that go with it, it bumps up to about $28,000 per month for about 15 years on a 15-year loan. So we decided that we wanted to take a step back from that option and look at other options, just because it was a really big building. I think it was about 20,000 square feet, which is a lot more than what we needed. So if we didn't utilize the whole space, our concern was, well, now do we become landlords, and how do we manage that? We don't quite have the staff to do that, so we felt for us the best suited place would be in a lease of 10 years or less, and that's what we have these options looking at. So I'll kick it back over to Jennifer from here.
Thank you. So the 2 options I'm going to focus on are both lease options. The first is the Citrus Towers, which is located about 1.5 blocks from here. And it really, after doing all of this research for the past year, we really felt this satisfied the most of our needs with the fewest compromises. So obviously the location is still ideal to be able to utilize this facility for our committee meetings, as well as all of the synergies and the convenience provided by being near the County Administrative Center, not just for our staff, but for all of our member agencies that we serve and all of the regional partners that come to visit us. The facility here at Citrus Towers, there's an entire suite that's currently vacant and provides plenty of space for us to suit our existing needs as well as future needs, and it's very flexible. So the building owner is willing to build out that space completely customized to our needs. They're even willing to cover all of those costs. So for us to go in and get an office built out exactly how we need it and exactly how we might need it in the future is completely covered by that building owner, and at a very rapid cost compared to some of the other options we looked at. So they estimated about a 4-month time move-in. And then it's somewhat of a newer building, so there's hopefully less concern for construction issues. The downsides are it is a 10-year lease. However, like I mentioned, we've been in this building for about 15 years, so we don't anticipate moving within a 10-year time frame. The per rent cost is a little bit higher, which Ernie will talk about, and there is a higher cost to park there.
Okay, so I'd like to go over these costs with you with respect to the Citrus Towers. And what we did is we broke it down utilizing square foot. And initially, when we brought this to the board back in August, we did not have this as an option. So we went back, took a look at what was available in the downtown area, and this was brought to our attention, this location here. Initially, the cost was $3.10 a square foot. So what staff did is we went out and got the broker, Andy, to help us with that and negotiated some. And so what we tried to do is get that price down as much as we could, and we were recommending $3 or anything lower than that. What he decided to do is said, no, I'm not going to move from the 310, but what I will do, initially what we looked at was the 10,597 in square foot. The owner will build out the complete 10,597 at their cost at $70 a square foot, give us all that. But he said, in addition to that, I will give you the additional 2,081 square feet that's off to the side of that wasn't going to be used. I'll build that out for you, and then I'll let you not get rent on that for about 2 years. So that will give us the option if we wanted to utilize that space, we could. So between all the savings that was given to us on the back end, was over $1 million worth of savings. So when we're looking at that, we have two options that we have here. The first is including the entire 12,678 square feet at that 310. Like I said, the tenant improvements would be no cost to us there, and what we're estimating is just for furniture, and the furniture cost of about $312,000. When we look at the square foot per employee, now we're up to 423. And again, like Jennifer said, the estimated time frame to move in was about 4 months, 120 days. We're looking about May 1st as of right now. Again, the highlights of what we're going to get from this building is the $70 a square foot of tenant improvements, 2 free months at the 10,597, and 26 total free months of rent, including those incentives of over $1 million that we got. So after 10 years, what we're looking at is $4,081,870, and this includes the net amount of those incentives. And what I'd like to do is kind of show you what the net effect is of that, getting the $1 million. Basically brings the cost down from $310 to $2.68 a square foot just by getting those incentives put back into there. And we also looked at that just at that 10,597 mark just to see what that would be as well. So again, same parameters. The difference is a little bit less square foot per employee at $353. Same time frame for move-in. The cost there is going to be about $3.7 million, or the net cost of about $244. It'd be $244 on that one. So.
Thank you, Ernie. Do we have any questions on option 1 at this time? Okay. The second option is, again, going back to the recommendation from our August Executive Committee. We did some additional research on the Pacific Premier Bank building, and we still left it as an option because of some of the big advantages it offers being close to the CAC. It does provide enough space for our employees and meetings. However, the layout of that suite available is it's a much more awkward space, so it would be a little bit more difficult for us to customize everything. However, it does provide the space that we need, and the rent and lease terms are the same as what we currently have here in the CAC. In addition to that inflexibility with the office layout, it is a much longer time frame to move in because there is a significant amount of tenant improvements and renovations that would need to be made over at that Pacific Bank building in order to bring it up to our needs. You know, through that construction could unveil other issues, other costs that we can't foresee right now. And then finally, the ability for tenant improvements and renovations to be completely covered does not exist in this option.
So at this particular building, when we looked at it, there was 3 office suites. They're together, but they're not contiguous. So the problem that we ran into is that we had 2 contiguous and 1 off to the side. So it's a little bit difficult to build that one out, and it's not as flexible in terms of being able to build out the suites that we wanted to. But there was 10,663 square feet available at the current price we're paying now, or $2.02 a square foot. The tenant improvements that we estimated was $603,000. That was based on some worksheets and invoices that we have for buildings that are somewhat the same. We're able to get those prices, plug those in, but that represents about a $56 a square foot for tenant improvements, which is a lot less than the $70. So that amount could be more. When we looked at the square foot per employee, that was 355 square feet, and we're looking at about 12 months roughly to move in, so it's a longer time frame with that one as well. And so when we looked at the total cost, and then we add back in the tenant improvements to look at what we're really paying, we go from $2.02 a square foot to $2.76 a square foot, which is annualized over the 10 years. So that one does go up in price quite a bit. So.
All right, so the last 2 options I'm going to cover quickly, so let me know if you have any questions. Again, with the Western building, it's a really cool building they have over on Alessandro. It's about 16,000 square feet. It has a water-efficient garden associated with it, so that was kind of the reason we looked at this building to begin with, because of some of those creative options for us to redesign the space. If renting were to be an option, which at this point we don't think it is because of Western's movement to sell the building, it would be more affordable. However, it is pretty far from our current office space, so we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the convenience of this location. And there is just tons of improvements, including a new roof, that would be needed to the building to bring it up to compliance, ADA, and other regulations. And so that would just, push out the time frame and the tenant improvement costs. We're going to, unless anyone has questions, we'll skip to the next option. Okay. Finally, option 4, again, is purchasing a commercial building. Because of the liabilities associated with insurance, with the unforeseen, derivations in our revenue stream to WRCOG, we're not confident that we could sustain a mortgage for the 15 to 30-year mortgage term. So because of those kind of more policy, big picture issues, staff didn't feel that purchasing a building would be the best decision for us at this time. So this chart, going back to our 2 lease options, provides that summary for you. It shows option 1 has an option with more square footage, 12,000 square feet. Option 1, Citrus Towers, also has a sub-option with 10,000 square feet, and then we have the Pacific Premier Bank building. This just summarizes, again, that rent, the tenant improvement costs, the total net effect, which builds in all of the incentives offered to the owner and transitions it into the kind of the net cost per square foot, and finally, the estimated time frame. So at this point, we'd be looking for questions on any of these options or a recommendation from this committee to move forward with a single option.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay.
The admin committee recommendation, again, was option 1.
Okay. Corona?
I do have one question on the additional cost. I know there's so many people here. The additional cost for parking, you'd said it was going to cost employees more. Were the employees willing to do that, or is that a cost that's figured into this?
It's a cost that it is more. So what we were planning on doing is having the agency absorb that cost and just subsidize the difference over what it would be currently now. The employees pay $35 for parking here, and it would be $65 at the other place. So we would subsidize for those that not everybody has parking here. About half the staff does. So we would make that available.
But did you figure that into this cost that you're showing us?
That's
okay.
as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it Laura? Are you next?
Oops. I just had one question on the option 1. If we elected to take the extra square footage for the first 26 months, are we locked into that for the 10 years, so we're obligated to keep it, or would we be able, if we didn't need it at that point, to go back down to the lower footage?
As long as we didn't have it built out, I think we'd be okay not using it. But Andy can come up and answer that question. This is our broker. He can explain that one for us.
Sure. Hi, Andy Lustgarten. So the answer is, with the additional space, what the landlord would do is they would build it up front, but then they'd give us 26 months of no rent. So we have an opportunity to grow into that space. So once the space is built and we've received the benefit of 26 months of no rent, we'd be obligated to that space through the end of the 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next
The only other thing I'd say to that is, the benefit in having that done up front is the landlord's building it at sole cost and expense, versus if 2 years from now we decided that we needed more space, we'd likely receive a lesser allowance and be responsible for the upside construction cost.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Norco, followed by Supervisor Jeffries.
What's the current 10-year rent?
Where we're at right now?
Where you're at right now?
We pay $2.02 a square foot, and there's a 3% escalator every year.
So for the next 10 years, what would that cost?
It was about $3.8 million. I'm going to double check that and I can get back to you. I don't have that in front of me right now. I know I had it somewhere, but I don't have it right now. but it's about 3.8 million.
So for a new building with extra square footage and things like that, you're talking about another $281,870.
Roughly, yeah. Over 10 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Supervisor Jeffries, and then following will be the City of Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for me, the challenge for me personally was getting over the fact that we don't want to own a building because of the liabilities associated with that. I just assumed that, you know, if you can afford it, you do it. You don't pay rent the rest of your life, you own it, and you pay maintenance costs. I just assumed we had the funding and we wouldn't have to do a mortgage, but apparently we don't have the funding, although I may dispute that. I guess I'm disappointed that we picked the second, I think it's the second most expensive building in Riverside as the place we want to call home. That just comes across as really unacceptable to most taxpayers that a government entity is going to pick the first or the second most expensive building in downtown Riverside as their home. And that disappoints me. I wish we had found something more affordable and more respectable to the taxpayers who are going to pay for this one way or another. So, you know, there's the Red Wine and Cheryl Law Building that's for sale right down on Market Street. That's 10,000 square feet, 1.7 million. We could almost fund that out of partial of our reserves, but we don't want to own. So I'm not happy with these choices. I respect that you do want to rent instead of own, and that part I guess I can accept, but the most expensive place is not something I can support, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Paris.
Yes, my question was with the admin finance, there are two number one options on the screen. Did they approve the one with the more square footage or the lesser square footage?
When we took this to the admin finance, we didn't have the new option, which included the 2,081 square feet. So initially it was the 10,597, but it was with the understanding that we'd get the lease at $3 a square foot. And so what ended up happening is the owner came back and said, the lease will stay as is, but I'll give you these extra incentives, which included the 2,081 extra square feet built out with no rent for 2 years on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now that we would be going to approximately 5,000 square feet to above 10,000 square feet, do we need that extra 2,000 square feet, particularly with Andy's recent comments that if they do build it out, we're obligated to that for 8 years of the remaining 10 years of lease?
Sure, thank you. Our thought was because we had an opportunity to reserve that space essentially cost-free for over 2 years, if this committee felt that our activities, the growth of the agency, it provides sort of that wiggle room if we are assigned new tasks, new programs for that growth. Certainly understand that it does present a little bit of a risk if we don't have that growth come to the agency and then end up not utilizing that space. So it is a pretty small square footage. It may be difficult for the owner to rent it in the interim either way. However, we just wanted to provide that comparison should this committee feel it wanted that potential for growth in the next 10 years.
Okay, so then to rephrase, the Admin Finance Committee approved it with the lesser square footage, is that correct?
That's correct. And then we became aware of this new option since that meeting.
Do we have any other questions? Seeing none, do we have any recommendations for staff?
If I can just add a couple comments to address Supervisor Jeffries' comments, which are, we definitely have taken those to heart over the past year. And I think something to keep in mind is our agency has really outgrown our space probably for the last 5 years, if you look at the numbers. So this is, in a perfect world, something we would have started many years ago. And I think we have now a lag of time where we have been paying a much, much lower rate than probably we should have had because we have a small square footage. And so we really did try to search high and low for anything that was available to capture those synergies and efficiencies of being close to the CAC, but offering a somewhat affordable rate. And I think some of the benefits and incentives that the owner has offered to us is because, we've expressed that we're a public agency and that we're very concerned about those issues. And so this really is the result of everything we've looked for. And like I said, I think we're kind of at a lag. We have been paying a very, very small amount of rent per square foot per employee for the last couple years.
City of Corona?
Yes, I'd like to move option 1 at the 10,000 plus square feet.
Okay. Next, we have Supervisor Jeffries.
I was just going to respond to the recommendation. Let's assume, and I agree, that we need more space. You still haven't justified why you picked the most expensive space in Riverside, other than it's convenient to walk to for a handful of employees.
Sure. It wasn't the only option we looked at. We actually had about 5 or 6 options, including some variations of staying here within our existing space at the CAC. And we presented kind of that range of options to the Administration and Finance Committee several times. We presented it to our staff for their input. And so it wasn't that this was our first choice. This choice was the result of about a year's worth of searching and discussions and kind of whittling down those options with our committee members.
Okay. Thank you. We do have a second now. We've had the motion by the City of Corona and a second by the City of San Jacinto. Rick, did you want to say something?
I just also wanted to kind of add on to the purchase option. It was something that we did put a lot of thought into, and I think in the end, one of the things that was voiced to us, it's not so much a matter of staff having convenience coming over here to the building, but a lot of it has to do with it. A lot of our members like the idea of being able to bundle trips together, and so when they make a visit to the CAC, they can also stop by our office, and that makes it real convenient. So for thought of the members and the convenience factor, the farther we get, even once you translate from a walkable distance to a non-walkable distance, that does really limit our options here around the CAC. And then, as our broker would tell you, there just really aren't many options for us to look at. And then back to the other issue that really I don't really think it has been hit on as hard as it should be. We're different than a county, and we're different than a city, and our revenue sources just aren't always as consistent or the same. And so, to us, making a decision to purchase a building and then not be able to make those payments and honor those payments and have a more difficult ability to get out, we think is a little bit onerous, not only to us but to the member jurisdictions as well. So a lease option and the ability to either renegotiate a lease or get out of a lease seemed like it was a more prudent way for us to go versus a purchase. I think, and then to kind of extend the discussion a little bit, just depending on where the agency goes or doesn't go. If there were programs that ultimately are assigned to the agency that come with more consistent revenue streams, then I think then the idea and option for a purchase would be something that we would maybe ask the executive committee to revisit.
Okay, thank you. We do have some comments from the City of San Jacinto, Harupa Valley, and then the Western Water.
I just want to say that, first of all, WRCOG, from the time that I've been on City Council, has been very prudent with their money and their spending. They don't go out and they're not frivolous about it. They think things through very thoroughly, and so far I've seen them take action that has benefited this committee. We know that they're responsible with their money. They make smart decisions, and I understand exactly, why they want to be in this area. And I understand that it might be the second highest cost of the building in Riverside County. However, I would have to say that they got a pretty good deal. From what it looks like, they negotiated a pretty good deal. So we should really be proud of the work that they're doing. They're continuing to work on the behalf of our citizens and doing it in a very prudent, meticulous way, so they aren't spending money frivolously, and I commend you for that.
Thank you. And then we have Harupa Valley.
Just wanted a clarification. Was the motion for the smaller square footage or the full 12, the smaller? Okay, thank you.
For the smaller one, I believe. Okay, now Western Water.
So I just wanted to chime in because I'm moving along the lines of Supervisor Jeffrey's sentiments. I don't like spending money that we don't have to spend, and I have two things. One, I'm certainly happy to go back to my agency to see if a leasing option would be more beneficial for all parties involved, because that's something that I can go back and ask. The question of, I know that it was coming to it because when you guys came to us, it was something that you discussed about the purchase rather than a lease, so we switched the option for you guys for that consideration. So if it's that you want to lease instead, and that makes it more of an attractive option, we can certainly get that discussion open. And then chiming in on what Rick just said, that the broker could come up and say if there were any other options that were more attractive than these were, if you could chime in on that as a possibility, and what has been looked at versus what could still be looked at.
Sure. So we evaluated 17 options in a market survey. We toured probably half of those options. And the challenge with a lot of these older buildings that require a full build-out is, although the lease rate may be cheaper on a per square foot basis, the tenant improvement allowance is significantly less expensive. So it becomes a question of, do you want to save money up front in the capital costs and building space where there is no cost to build space at Citrus Tower, and then you pay a slightly higher rental rate moving forward through the balance of the term, or do you want the discounted rent up front and the higher capital cost to construct new space? So that's what we had to evaluate and ultimately came to this decision. And there's a very limited inventory of 10,000 plus square foot spaces in downtown Riverside. That became the challenge. If there was a need for 2,000 square feet, a number of other buildings open up. When you start talking about 10,000 square feet, there are just a very limited number in downtown Riverside, and particularly in close proximity to this building.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Washington?
I just wanted to sort of underscore, I think, some of Mr. Bishop's comments. I can recall when revenue was less predictable, especially leading up to the recession, and TUMF revenue dropped off significantly. I don't think I would be speaking out of school if I said shared, because she's made a full recovery, but my daughter lost her place that she was buying in that recession, in that downturn, because her income dropped off dramatically. She has fully recovered from that, but you don't come away from those experiences without some scar tissue and some real reluctance to commit yourself until you know for certain that you can meet that commitment financially. And so I feel your pain. It's easy to say when you're buying a place to live in, buy. It took a lot for me to talk my daughter and son-in-law into revisiting that when they could again. But for a public agency, and again, not knowing the revenue stream is going to always be there to make that monthly payment. I don't know what kind of terms you would have been offered for that mortgage. I don't think they offer 30-year mortgages for what you guys do. What was it?
15 is what we got.
Is that 15?
Yeah.
Straight 15 or 5, 5, and 5?
It was straight 15.
Straight 15. So, I guess ideally it would be nice if you could get to a point where you weren't going to have to pay rent. But I'm sure you looked at all of those. I, for one, I'm up here a lot, more than I'd like to be, because I'm not in my district right now. But when I'm up here, I do like to have meetings close. Don't tell anybody that I said this about RTA, but having to go over there to their office for meetings, it just adds to that inconvenience. Same is true when I go to first 5 commission meetings. They're over, it's only 10 minutes away, but it means getting in my car and driving, dealing with the freeway and all that. So I think even though maybe for you guys you don't mind, but for your member agencies, if it's an issue of adding some convenience for them. I don't know that, I haven't made up my mind yet what I'm supporting, but I wanted to underscore some of those points.
Okay, we have Harupa Valley and then Menifee.
I'll try to make this my last question, sorry. Actually, two, a question and a comment. I don't know if this can be shared, but if the perception in the community is that this is the second most expensive building to rent in Riverside County, which I have no disagreement with, it's beautiful, it's newer, I get that. I think perception is something that's very important that we need to consider. But I'm wondering if with the negotiations that we've made, if we are maybe paying a lower than market rate in that building. I don't know if that can be verified or shared because there's probably privacy issues, but that would be one thing I'd like to know if possible. The other comment I have is that I do like the idea of reconsidering the western location. I know you guys have been at this diligently for a year and that you've looked at this a whole bunch of different ways, but the thing that keeps intriguing me about that location is having the garden there, but also the sort of dream or far-off vision that we've talked about, having this sort of a sustainability demonstration center. And I feel like that property would be conducive to that because of its size and just the way it's laid out and those kinds of things. I realize it would take longer to move into it. The tenant improvements are probably higher just by virtue of it being an older building. But I hate to eliminate that completely today if that is still something that could be utilized. So I think I've questioned and commented enough, and I will share that I'm not 100% comfortable supporting the motion today.
So I can speak to the pricing, although not in 100% specificity because of some confidentiality, but what I'd say is no tenant in the Citrus Tower building has received more than $50 a square foot in tenant improvements, and no tenant has been offered a landlord build-to-suit where there's no upside risk on construction cost. So compared to the $50 maximum that's been received by any other tenant at this building, our estimated construction cost of $70 getting covered by the landlord far exceeds any allowance that's been offered. And our rent is competitive. There has not been a deal signed in this building at less than $310 a foot for the last 2 years. So, you know, on a net effective basis to evaluate the transaction on the table compared to other transactions on the table, there has not been a less expensive transaction. That much I can tell you.
Okay. City of Menifee?
First one, there we go. I'm not sure I'm knowledgeable enough on this, but did you say, realtor involved, did you say that there really weren't a bunch of properties around in Riverside for sale? And it was kind of said that there might be. You mentioned one. The second thing is in this world, in my world in real estate, if you owned a building for 10 years and then you had to move out because your income fell, you could sell it for a profit. I'm confused.
There certainly are other buildings for sale. What I had mentioned earlier was a very limited inventory of space for lease once you start looking for a 10,000 square foot contiguous block in downtown Riverside. Certainly, you know, buying is an option, and there are buildings available for sale. Depending on when you need to sell, there's no certainty as to whether you'd be ahead or behind in that. That's just sort of timing and market fluctuations. So.
And then I would just add some of the other concerns were not just with unforeseen revenue constraints or growth. It was also some of the additional liabilities that we'd have to explore for purchase options, insurance, being liable if someone were to break into the building. You know, think a lot of other things that are taken care of under a lease option.
We have Harupa Valley again, and then Hemet. Okay, Hemet.
So my question is, and actually just ask this to the supervisor next to me, however, with regards to how many other people within that building rent that large of a space. And that being said, I mean, it's been my experience that the larger the area, you get compensation a little bit less per square foot because of the amount of the area that you're renting. So was this taken into consideration? Was the 310 the one right off the top, or had we negotiated down? And I understand the improvements, which is the offset, but do we know if, and there again, it's hard to know what other people are paying, but the number of, or the amount of square footage should certainly weigh in to a lesser square footage per square foot amount.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that was taken into consideration. There are not a lot of small users in that building. Most of them are larger users, similar to a 10,000 square foot. But yes, that was taken into consideration. And this particular owner is fairly sensitive to rental rate. So the flexibility there was in tenant improvement and free rent concessions.
Thanks for that clarification.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a couple of us down here.
Okay, you're not registering over here. Okay. Norco?
Yeah, my questions were kind of answered, but one of the things that I thought the same thing about over time, maybe a building's worth more money, but on the other hand, as somebody who owns buildings, you actually never know how much that building's going to cost you over time. And I know it's an unpopular view, but sometimes you have to take care of what is convenient for your employees. And I do think that is a valid concern. I think that if there's a way for them to be centrally located and have access to other buildings, I think that that is something that we need to take into consideration. I also think, just as elected, I really don't care about me, but it is nice for me because I have to go to different places here like Supervisor Washington. But I do think it's a valid concern that the employees need someplace that's centrally located as opposed to being kind of far out. And I just want to put in my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Lake Elsinore?
Yes. We've been looking at this for over a year, and it's been before the Admin and Finance Committee. And, I look at these numbers, and I don't see a big range here, so it's not like we're asking for, one building costs $1 million or leases $1 million. And I don't know if any of the members here have been upstairs lately, but I think Barbara just got kicked out of her office. I saw her desk and her hat sitting in the corner, and folks, it's tight up there. And so I think we have a good move on this. I think we just need to call for the vote and stop messing around.
Okay. Marietta, were you yes or no? Okay.
I think we're having button issues down here.
Yeah, now we're not having button issues. This is, I'm brand new today, and so this is a brand new issue for me, but I also remember when they were in the office previous to this office here. And we had to make it was the same discussion. It was a lot more expensive for them to be here. But I'll tell you what, it worked out a whole lot better. It worked out better for the organization because they had room to grow. And it worked out better for us as electeds because we could go to one place and get our business taken care of. What I'm hearing is there's a concern that we're picking the most expensive. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. It seems to me that we're picking the one that works the best. And, sometimes if you want to live next to the beach, it's going to cost you a little more. If you want a place for your employees to work and be effective for the business that we keep, obviously we've added a lot more since I've been here. But if we want them to be effective, then they have to have a place to be effective at. And the costs here, I was looking at, I think it was $280,000 for the 10 years over what we're paying now. Is that it? Is that correct? That's $28,000 a year divided by a bunch of agencies. sometimes the cost of trying to make it look like you're saving money costs more than if you just do what you want to do or what you need to do. So, I've been listening to everybody's comments, and I kind of land at, if you guys have been studying this for a year or even 4 months, I trust that you gave your staff direction to bring you the best options and present those to you. And I think that's what they're doing. And I don't think it would be a good idea to keep exploring each option over and over and over, because there's a cost to doing that also. So at some point, people need to make a decision, and I'm ready to go. So I'm done.
Okay.
So we'll call for the question.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second, unless there's... The motion was to select option number 1, the second one for the 10,597 square feet?
Correct.
Okay. Unless there's a burning desire to say anything else, please vote.
Can I ask the maker of the motion one question? I think it was Eugene.
Yes.
Yes.
Eugene, I was just curious, in 10 years they'll save $300,000. Well, you had a reason why you suggested that.
Partly because the adjacent space is possibly too small for somebody else to use and may be available at the same rate or better rate later. So I don't think that it's a decision we have to make today, and it guarantees saving $300,000 as opposed to a maybe needing the space later.
Okay, thanks.
So if you have not voted, please vote.
Western Municipal Water District, please vote. Thank you.
The motion passed, 16 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very much. And we want to move next week. Next, we have the distribution of round 2 beyond allocations to member jurisdictions. Andrea?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Howard. I'm a staff analyst here for WRCOG, here to present a proposed update to the Beyond program allocation formula.
Andrea? Can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Sorry. Better? Okay, so because we have a few new faces here, I'd like to just quickly give a brief overview of the Beyond program. Last year's pilot Beyond program provided $1.8 million to member agencies to make progress towards the 6 goal areas outlined in WRCOG's Economic Development and Sustainability Framework of economic development, education, health, transportation, water, and energy. Those funds are supporting more than 30 projects, distinct projects in the WRCOG subregion. Some have already been completed. In the past 2 fiscal years, WRCOG's HERO program has created a surplus, which staff have been directed to allocate towards agency programs. Last year, we had $3.3 million. This year, we are looking at the allocation of $4.3 million to be distributed, proposing as follows. $1.05 million would be directed to agency reserves. $700,000 would go toward agency activities such as the fellowship program, the CCA, and the Regional Streetlight Program. The Administration and Finance Committee directed staff to set $250,000 aside for a Regional Economic Development Initiative. And then finally, the focus of this presentation is the set aside of $2.05 million for the Beyond program, broken down with approximately $2 million toward the central pot of funding. That was essentially the same as the $1.8 million we used last year, for fixed allocations to each member agencies. And that is in addition to 2 competitive funds that would be set aside to fund $175,000 to incentivize collaborative projects between member jurisdictions, and then $75,000 for healthy communities initiatives. For the central pot of funding, the allocation formula that we are seeking would ideally hit on 2 primary goals. First, to avoid the pitfalls of a strictly population-based formula where you maybe have a concentration of the majority of funds allocated towards the few most populated jurisdictions. And then we also want to make sure that this was an equitable distribution. So last year's formula established 3 population groups in which members received a flat allocation plus a small additional per capita allocation. And this did use a population-based formula that avoided the concentration of funding with those few most populated jurisdictions. Unfortunately, this method created significant inequities in how the funding was distributed across member agencies. And so you can see those population tiers are distinguished by colors, red, green, and blue. And just for example, the city of San Jacinto has a population just slightly smaller than Lake Elsinore, but you can see that that population, the allocation is significantly larger for Lake Elsinore because they jumped onto the other side of that population threshold. And so that's a problem that we'd like to avoid with this proposed funding allocation. So the proposed formula distributes funds through a series of per capita allocations that incrementally decrease as the population rises across 5 population tiers. And now because this proposed formula would result in many jurisdictions receiving decreases in their funding than this last year, we'd like to propose a one-time increase to the total allocation of $250,000. And then we'd also like to propose a minimum allocation for all member jurisdictions and agencies of $35,000. And so the result here would be that we have only 3 jurisdictions with lower distributions in round 2 than in round 1, and the largest being for the city of Temecula with just over $13,000. And then that city of Calamisa would take advantage of the $35,000 minimum allocation. So this graph just shows you a visual of how those funding allocations compare to one another. The first, last year's allocation is shown with the blue squares, whereas the proposed funding allocation formula is in red. You can see that the red dots make a nice smooth line if you connect them all together, whereas you have those population groupings in the first one. And so that's what we're really looking to avoid here. So the proposed formula does avoid those pitfalls of concentrating the funds, and we believe equitably distributes those total agency funds. And so today we are seeking approval from this board to approve the tiered allocation formula to allocate beyond funding for round 2 and subsequent funding rounds, and also to increase the beyond round 2 allocation by a total of $252,917 from $1.8 million to just over $2.05 million. That concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have Supervisor Jeffries, followed by Harupa Valley. Thank you, Andrea.
I may have missed something here. On the page we have, which is labeled 195, we're only approving the bump from 1.8 million to 2.052. The others are not asked for in the staff recommendation. So increasing the reserves is not a staff recommendation, and the Regional Economic Development Initiative is not in this recommendation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are only covering beyond it at this time.
And did we already take action on those other ones that are dated to be proposed for January 9th at some other meeting?
We did take action on those, yes.
So these are not proposed for January 9th?
No.
As they're indicated in that column?
That's in the staff report, and I apologize, we have an update since then in our presentation here.
I'm sorry, there's another staff report?
In the staff report, I think if you saw this chart breakdown, then it says proposed for January 9th. That's just the total breakdown, but I apologize, that was a misrepresentation. So the only proposals for today are for beyond, and that would be that 2.05 for the beyond program, the fixed allocations, and then that distribution.
I understand. So if I may, when did we vote on the increase of the reserves and the Regional Economic Development Initiative?
June 24th?
Sure, thank you. Jennifer Ward again, Government Relations Director. The remainder of those categories were voted on at the Executive Committee meeting June 24th, 2016, the day after General Assembly, with the exception of that $250,000 for a regional economic development issue, which came out of an ad hoc decision and a final admin committee recommendation in, I believe, August of last year. So the broad categories were approved right after General Assembly. Ad hoc committee recommended some funding be devoted to regional economic development. And then today, the only proposal under consideration is for Beyond, like Andrea mentioned.
Just all I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, Harupa Valley.
I just wanted to clarify, so what we're voting on today is sort of a one-year or adjustment in the original formula, and then from now forward, the formula that we're using should be okay from year to year, barring if there's an increase in revenues, then I'm assuming it's an across-the-board increase for everyone. If it's a decrease in revenues, that it would be an across-the-board decrease for everyone. Is that accurate?
So going forward, the board would still every year have the opportunity to revisit how those carryover revenues are distributed to throughout WRCOG's programs. And so if Beyond is chosen to be renewed, it could be at that $1.8 million initial amount or any other amount of your choosing. So that's not on the table, and that's not something we're looking for you to have to commit to now going forward. What we are looking for is just for the ability of our member jurisdictions to count on some consistency of how the funding is distributed, that this formula that we could apply to any distribution amount be set a little bit more permanently.
Okay, that was my understanding. I probably didn't articulate that well. My only concern is I just want to make sure that we clarify on the $35,000 minimum, that is subject to whatever, like if there's a decrease in funding, that minimum. In other words, if we received 10% less revenues, then I would assume that $35,000 minimum would decrease by 10%. Is that?
That's not what we had set here, but I'm sure we could make that amendment to the recommended action today.
Okay. I don't know if that has to be done today. I guess what I'm concerned with is, so say if this program just drops off completely, hypothetically, I don't think that's going to happen, but if it did, then all of a sudden you would have a minimum allocation for certain jurisdictions, and others would have received a much larger percentage-wise loss of their dollars, whereas the minimum allocation would not have received any of that loss. So that was my concern.
Okay, perhaps we can set it such that that minimum allocation is not fixed, but the rest of the formula would be going forward.
Yeah. Whatever you need to do is fine. I just wanted to make everyone aware of it. That's it. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Lake Elsinore?
Yeah, I just want to say, when we started this last year, the idea was to revisit it every year and look at it. So if the program goes away, this body decides whatever changes left or whatever money is there that we can do with what we want. So this is not set in stone, and I don't want it to be set in stone because the allocations we use today, things change. We might all decide we want to do regional projects next year or the year after. And so I want to make sure that we have that flexibility and we don't put any restrictions in here, and that every year we can bring this back. So I think the minimum was just so Calamasa wasn't left out this year, and, well, Temecula and Murrieta, obviously, they did take a reduction. But, I mean, we're trying to do what's best for all the jurisdiction for our part of the county. So I would like for us to just keep on the same track that we're going now, and every year we bring it back and decide how we're going to spend the monies that we have available to the jurisdictions.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, I move approval of this project.
Second. Yeah, so basically then if we look at the recommended actions, then for number one, it would be allocate beyond funding for round 2, period. That's your motion. Okay. Do we have a second on it? Second. Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passed, 19 in favor and no noes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a report from the League of California Cities from Aaron Sassy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. As you know, things are starting to get a little bit more busy in Sacramento now that the holidays are over. Everybody's back to work. Committee assignments are being made. Our executive director's officially on the clock. She's been going around trying to meet everybody, so that's good. If any of you are going to our conference here in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to meet her at that. The governor is supposed to release the budget tomorrow at 11 a.m. I'm not sure if you saw this, but last week it was announced that revenues are down from projections, so we think that that will be a factor for his budget. He tends to try to be conservative. What we anticipate being in the budget is some transportation funding. SB1 and AB1 is this year's package, very similar to last year. It's $6 billion. And just to remind you of where the money goes, at least for this bill, it's 12 cents increase to the gas tax. I know there was discussion on that earlier. It would end the Board of Equalization's true-up process on the unreliable price based on the excise tax. A $38 increase to vehicle registration fees, a $100 increase to registration fees on zero-emission vehicles, a 20-cent increase on the diesel excise tax, $300 million from existing cap-and-trade funds, and $500 million in vehicle weight fees phased in over 5 years. Like I said, very similar to the previous proposals. We're hearing that they anticipate there being a deal by April, but we heard that several times last year and it never happened, so we'll see. Affordable housing is a big priority for the state this year. We do not expect there to be funding in the governor's proposal tomorrow, so I think it will be mostly driven by the legislature. HCD did release a housing report. I sent out that link to you. I do want to encourage all of you to read it. It's very interesting. It talks about the shortage of housing, but there is a graph that I think you should all look at. They are asking for comments. The graph shows the costs of housing when you combine the housing costs plus transportation. And our region, actually, the affordable housing costs are not so affordable once you factor in the transportation costs. So it actually shows the Bay Area and some of the more expensive areas being lower on that scale because their transportation costs are significantly less than ours. So I definitely want to encourage you to take a look at that. We have a lot of events coming up. I just want to run through them very quickly. Our division meeting that was scheduled for tonight in Wildomar has been rescheduled to February 13th. So please make sure that you are attending that. Really excited to have that meeting. It should be great. We have the ILG, the Institute for Local Government, is offering a free public engagement training that they are hosting on January 31st through February 1st at the Mission Inn. They are still looking for some cities to participate. It is limited. I sent out some information to all of your city managers today, but definitely a really good program. I want to encourage you, if it's something that would benefit your city, to sign up as soon as possible. There is also another ILG event on February 25th. It is going to be a hunger leadership breakfast. It's really just about the out-of-school mealtime programs, just to get information to all of you, how to implement those programs. I know Riverside does that. It's just really difficult. I know a lot of students don't have meals when the school sessions are out, so this is just trying to increase that participation, let all the cities know how you can be involved. So it should be a good event. We also have on February 3rd, we're doing our division local elected officials training. We did this a couple of years ago. We bring in Rick Bishop, Tom Kirk from CVAG. We bring in RTA, RCTC. Basically, it's just what are all of your local agencies? What is the league? What's some advice from more seasoned elected officials? And how can you be involved here locally? So I want to encourage you, and maybe if you have any new electeds in your cities, to attend this as well. With that, like I said, we have our new mayors and council members in 2 weeks, our policy committees, and then division meetings. So please make sure to attend all of those. I know it's a busy time, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
I'd like to know if you can give us just a brief email on all the dates.
Yes.
And then all the changes that you had for
I
the
know there's a
budget.
lot of events. I actually want to add one more thing that I did leave off. Today, our public safety lobbyists and some of our other Sacramento staff met with CDCR Secretary Scott Kernan to talk about the implementation of Prop 57. We don't have any information yet. It sounds like they're just starting to reach out, work with the various stakeholder groups. But as soon as we have some information, we'll be sending that out to share with all of you. But at least the communication is happening on that. But yes, I'll get some dates out.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for Aaron?
Yes. I pressed my button, but I don't know if it's working.
Kind of, sort of.
Oh, okay.
Can I
Kind of,
kill
sort
it?
of. Okay, thanks. Ms. Sassy, I always appreciate your updates. You mentioned something that piqued my interest, and maybe Mr. Executive Director, you and Mr. Gray can focus in on it. You mentioned the focus on the state budget for affordable housing, and it's also, you said it'll probably be driven by the legislature. And again, there's the dynamics that we're forced to deal with. We're going to be looking at the raising the fee for infrastructure, probably by necessity. I'm not arguing that, but at the same time, that drives the affordability quotient, out of the box. But then RENA's going to ask us to provide affordable housing, and so they're handing us this conundrum, this unfunded or unable thing for us to meet in our general plan. So maybe Mr. Executive Director, Mr. Gray can get the information on what's going to evolve out of the Capitol and plug that into our TUMP discussions.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do so, but I did want to mention that in the existing TUMP program, there is an exclusion from affordable housing paying TUMP fees.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
I understand. So we know affordable housing doesn't pay TUMP, but I guess the point is you won't do it because you can't afford to do it. I'll have the discussion with you offline. Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll have a report from our Technical Advisory Committee Chair, Gary.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide you this information from the TAC. We were dark during the month of December, but we do look forward to meeting in January. And given the hearing the discussion this afternoon in the direction we receive from the board, we look forward to having a robust discussion about the TUMP fees during the January meeting. So thank you very much, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. And do we have anything from CalCog? Mr. Tisdale?
There was no CalCog meeting. It's quarterly, so the
Okay.
next meeting is coming up.
Okay, thank you. And then, does anybody want to make a report from SCAG? Supervisor Washington?
I didn't go. I decided this once I would pass.
Okay. I'm just trying to check the buttons here. Anybody else over here? Okay. Just really briefly, you do have one thing here that says revenue distribution. This was from the CHD committee, and it was from a presentation given by Weed Spots regarding recreational marijuana. The slide presentation was 60 slides, so if you would like to look at it, it is on the SCAG website. But this page I thought was pretty interesting for cities who think they're going to get a lot of money. It kind of breaks it down as to where the money is going to go in terms of revenue distribution. We had a joint meeting also with all the committees and to hear a presentation from the Air Resources Board. And I would ask you to go to the website to see that presentation because they are talking about implementing the different Senate bills and Assembly bills regarding continuing increasing the amount of conservation that they want us to have for energy. Do we have any report from our Executive Director?
Just very briefly, as I mentioned last month, WRCOG has been putting on a number of streetlight demonstration tours in the city of Hemet, and thank you to the city of Hemet for making a number of streetlights available for that, and we've had 12 different manufacturers participate in that. The tours were very successful. We had 4 tours, about 100 people in all attended, including many from your staff. And based on that, we decided to add one more tour, so we do have one more shot for you or your city or county representatives to attend, and that tour is scheduled, I believe, for January 19th. and we'll get information out to you. We also do know, in working with the jurisdictions, about 8 or 9 of the jurisdictions will be considering action and participating in the program during the months of January and February, and we'll be working closely with those jurisdictions that haven't, put those in the queue for decision making. And hopefully, our goal is to be able to wrap this program up sometime this spring. So we're real excited about the progress that's been made. Special thanks to the City of Hemet for providing an opportunity for people to actually see something.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any items for future agendas? I did ask for one in regards to the VMT, if we could possibly get an update on the status of that for one of our future meetings. And if nothing else, then I'll ask if we have any general announcements. Seeing none, then we will move to close, and I'm asking everybody to take a moment of silence as we close in the memory of Supervisor John Benoit. Thank you, and with that, our meeting is adjourned.